Ta-da! We're all here. Hello.
The sad part about being live and having to mute the stream is I don't get to hear the Sama music anymore. That was good stuff.
Yeah, it's true. It's very relaxing. And correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't the artist who did all the Sama stuff one of the ones that worked for Arcen back in the day?
I don't think so, although I'm not 100% sure about that because I don't think it sounds like it would be, right? It sounds like it's Pablo Vega's music, but I don't think it is Pablo Vega's music.
Artwork. Oh. Not music. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, yes. Artwork, yeah. I don't know if I misheard you or what, but yeah, the artwork is done by Kat, who Langren, who I don't know. I hope I didn't butcher her last name there, but she worked on art for, I believe, a couple of our Arcen games, including The Last Federation, and she did a lot of the like backgrounds and more ambient type stuff. So she, I think she did all the art in this game as well, entirely on her own, and then her significant other did the programming.
Sounds.
And I think it's all handcrafted too. It's not procedural. It's actually all handcrafted.
Yes.
I believe.
Yes. It is.
Yeah.
It is all handcrafted. All right, so we want to start off today on what we're going through. I mean, I can do a quick, I don't want to say recount, but like a quick once-over, just basically starting with the topic. And I guess, Cup, you will get to lend your wisdom and expertise, and Craig can hop in and add to it. But essentially, we're going to be talking about how to put your best foot forward as an indie developer, i.e. customizing your store page and maybe even launching the store page. Like what you need to have in place if you're going to launch your store page for the first time, because you have, 3 major milestones when you are going to launch your game through Steam specifically. It's launching the store page, higher visibility, if you go into early access, and then upon actual releasing the game are the 3 big steps. So you want to make sure, like we said, have your best foot forward whenever you're doing these things. So take it away, Cup.
Yeah, sure. And I'll add on to that it's becoming increasingly more important to have a post-launch plan as well, and think about milestones after those initial 3 that you mentioned there, Bumpy. So, yeah, it's an interesting topic because there's a lot to cover, a lot to go over. I think one thing I'd like to do at some point as an exercise is go over maybe a couple of store pages. Perhaps maybe get them on browser view on the stream via Bumpy. We'll see if he's able to whip that on the fly as we're talking about them. Yeah, we will see how it goes. If it's technically annoying, we don't have to do that, but we can just kind of say, hey, we're going to go to this page and take a look and see what they do, that kind of thing. And go over the sections, and you'll notice that on some store pages, some sections will kind of be activated while others they don't even exist on. So it just depends on, there's obviously, it's a modular kind of thing where you can use the sections that you need, although there's some, fundamental ones that you'd always expect to have. You mentioned, and I think a good place to start is, where do you need to be? Where does your game need to be in terms of development to say now is the time to get a coming soon page up and running? And that's increasingly becoming like earlier on in the process, I think. It used to be that you didn't really want to reveal too much about what you're working on until everything was really final on various different development areas, and a big one is art. I still think art is probably something that you'd like to get kind of figured out, or that's the direction you're heading in before making the leap onto Steam and putting it out there for people who are going to consider buying the game to see. So it's something to keep in mind on that front. But otherwise, it's like, okay, do we have an interesting concept to talk about here? How developed is it, and can we show video footage of it? If not, do we at least have still images, work in progress screens that we could show that we're proud of, alpha footage that we'd be willing to put out there and believe that other people will, just random folks on the internet will see it and have the right reaction to it, right? You don't want them to see it and be completely turned off the first time they come across your art. So it is, I think that's a really big thing is to have the art ready to go. Obviously, you don't want to start putting out your coming soon page before you feel like you've really nailed down your concept in terms of your design. And, you know, you obviously want to have confidence that you're going to be able to complete, you know, and be able to ship the project that you're working on, which is, you know, it sounds, you know, kind of obvious and commonsensical, but it's hard to do. It's hard to necessarily make that guarantee that you can do that if you don't have, let's say, the budget or the manpower set up ahead of time. If this is your first, you know, endeavor on this front, it might be something that surprises you in terms of, oh, how much longer this is going to take, or the scope change, that kind of thing. So it's all something that you just want to keep in mind if you're you know, kind of a budding dev, or if you're getting into it, that you're confident that you'll be able to complete the product. It's not the end of the world, obviously, if you don't. It's just sort of obviously disappointing to the people that you put the game out to, or the coming soon page out to, for them to look at. And also, it's yeah, just sort of this incomplete feeling, right? You have a game that you meant to get out there. Arcen has one called Stars Beyond Reach that will never release. And it is probably the second most popular game that Arcen has ever created. And I don't know, that's a really weird statement to say, because the game never actually manifested into anything, but it has this hype that still exists today. We still get emails today about why can't you release Stars Beyond Reach, that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting thing. It's not really a happy problem. Maybe we could turn it into a happy problem at some point, but try to avoid that if you can, obviously. Other than that, get the Steam store page up when you can, as early as possible, to get, well, a couple of things. To get the flow of your, like, wish lists and follows, etc., started as early on in the process as you can. And then also to gather data and get information about how your current, at least the current iteration of your store page, is faring in the Steam ecosystem. You know, how many, you know, kind of natural wish lists are you getting a day without having an event going on, or something that is pushing a spike of wish lists, etc. That's a very important metric to understand how many sales are going to, you know, come in when you launch the game. It's not, you know, an exact science, but if you're, say, pulling in 5 wish lists a game, or excuse me, 5 wish lists a day on your store page, that's considered kind of not that big of a deal. 10's like, okay, that's solid. 15 to 20, like, all of a sudden publishers might be taking interest in you. You know, 25, 50 plus. Now we're talking like some really clear natural traction for your store page. So those are kind of the things you're starting to set up. Craig, feel free to comment or jump in on any of these kind of points that I'm making, or whatever. If you feel like I'm off on any of it, or if you just feel that that's fine and I'm on, then no worries there. But that's kind of where I think you have to start. You have to understand, you know, obviously have a good understanding, self-awareness of where your game is at in development. Have you already, you know, showed it to not just friends and family, but trusted individuals, colleagues and such, that will give you, you know, good, fair, hard feedback and critiques that you can understand, okay, is this ready for sort of prime time viewing, or do we need to kind of hold this back still until we get it to a point where there really is an excitement for it? And that could be the game design and gameplay and art itself, or it could also just be that you haven't worked out exactly how to describe it yet, right? Like how to sell it, how to pitch it to a general audience. That's a super important point that we'll be getting to today. It's not just about how your game looks or how it plays, but also the you know, the short descriptions and elevator you know, pitches, etc., and descriptions and features lists that you have to include on your Steam store page. Those are all, you know, opportunities to hook people in right then and there, or at least, you know, move them further down the potential I'm going to buy your game funnel that everybody talks about on the development side. So that's where you start, and then I think from there we can kind of move into other things. But some feedback, or, you know, responses from Tiny Disaster and Bumpy on those points.
Real quick, here's what Craig threw at us here. I think it's important to try and launch your coming soon page with some fanfare. perhaps with outreach, so as to elevate your title above games going live in terms of impressing the Steam algorithm. So, what is... Sorry, Craig, let me... to elevate your title above other games going live. So you mean to already kind of have a fan base going with the game before you decide to launch it?
Yeah, I think he's saying specifically, like, you're going to get more buzz at your launch if you put, like, a PR push behind it, right? So we're going to not just launch our store page anonymously. This is a great point, by the way, that I completely missed. But we're going to actually launch the Steam store page and announce that the game is coming in 2022 via PR push. And so by doing that, more individuals from outside of Steam are coming in, not just a head start, but every other store page that goes live that day is not doing, you would imagine most of them are not doing what you're doing. And so you cannot, it's not just the head start aspect, which is very true. The head start aspect leads to the fact that you're probably going to stay above water longer, possibly for a really long continued period of time. So it's definitely about spiking at the start. That's a great point. You don't want to just walk into it and just say, okay, we have the coming soon page. We might tweet about it. No, obviously at your socials, anybody who's been following your game to this point in your community needs to be notified as well. It shouldn't just be a PR push to, news outlets and such, especially if it's a first title or first, go around as a developer. It's going to be harder to pick up press articles and such. So you want to be more focused on community at that point. Unless you're a developer like, say, Vertigo, that's releasing, a new cook serve game or something like that, then of course you're going to be able to pull more media and press. Then you're going to want to try to make sure that you have a nice balanced plan there of community and, marketing and PR to the general mavens of the world via social medias, websites, podcasts, video casts, streams, YouTubes, etc.
Yeah, so I was going to say pretty much what Greg was saying here, that above the competition, that's what I meant with head start. You have a head start over the other folks, so Steam's gonna be like, oh, this game has more coming into it. So he says a lot of games limp onto the storefront, which can put those games at a disadvantage compared to the title that launches with some PR and fanfare. So yeah, pretty much.
To me, it's exactly the same at launch, at early access launch. It's the same concept. You have to treat it the same, right? Like your coming soon page arrival is a launch in itself, or an announcement, kind of, that needs to be an event in itself.
Yeah.
And that's kind of some of the, at least I think that what we just pointed out is bare minimum what you want to do for an optimal situation, but you could also be doing, other creative events that tie to your game. Alpha releases, betas, privates, publics, demos. I think pre-release demo is okay. There's a debate about whether you should demo your game or not. I think a lot of times there are obviously certain concepts and genres that you probably don't want to necessarily throw demos out for, but most cases you can do a intelligently designed demo that whets the appetite but doesn't fully give away everything, and also allows potential fans and buyers of your game a chance to confirm, the initial thoughts that they're seeing on it. And if they bounce off of it, that's probably okay too. You get that feedback, maybe we need to make adjustments, or the game just wasn't for them, and it's okay for them to, it's okay for you to funnel someone through to determine whether they want your game or not, and it's okay for them to not want it. You know what I mean? It's better to do that than not have them figure that out and just be hanging around and being like, I think I might want your game, and then eventually figure out they don't. That's not necessarily a positive fan to have around. You want them to, you obviously want to be able to give people in the pre-release as much as possible without, giving away the game in full.
All right, I got two questions.
Or the best bits, yeah.
We'll start with one for a tiny disaster here. What would you say should be going on for social media leading into a Steam store page launch? What would you think would be the ideal, I don't want to say program or whatever, but how would you go about it?
Reading the initial comment about going into it with some fanfare, I could definitely see how it seems so intimidating to anyone who it's their first game, they're a solo dev or a small team, and nobody knows who I am. Why would they care? how can I create fanfare when this is literally my first foot out the door? But that's where like everything you've said so far of, you know, working with something like the Indie Bros who has relationships you might not, or socials of, this is why it can be so valuable to get going long before you're trying to sell your game. Of just kind of putting yourself out there just as a member of the community. You can talk about, like, absolutely talk about the fact that you're working on developing a game. This is what you're working on. This is what you're trying to do. So just like sharing some of that process to build that community before marketing in a more deliberate sense is ever really on the table, of like having that following, no matter how big it is going to be that foundation to let you amplify everything you do a little bit further. So there's no like perfect program you can do or like anything like that, but you know, figuring out exactly which platforms you want to be, establishing yourself on them before you're trying to get people to go to even your coming soon page. Because like, yes, you're technically not selling them anything yet, but you are. So like having a presence on Twitter and engaging with other people and being a voice in that community before you're actually like asking people for something. Basically give before you ask is always a good way of looking at it.
Right. And I feel like that's, you know, once you get that initial, you know, I have some support group, right? If not a full fan base, I have support group of folks that will like, retweet, etc. At that point, when and hopefully that's something that you get set up as you reach that coming soon page situation, because you want some sort of support group when you're starting to put out your tweets. You don't want to be like tweeting for the first time, of course, or pushing your TikTok or pushing your Instagram for the first time on you know, when you're just hitting the coming soon point. Ideally, obviously, you'd be working, you know, putting in some amount of work, you know, months in advance to try to, again, build a support group, if not a fan base, around your game and your accounts. And then from there, I want to get your opinion on this, A Tiny Disaster, but from my understanding, it's kind of okay to go a little ad nauseum when it's important timing, like, right? So if it's like the launch, coming soon launch, or the launch of the actual game, etc., like you have to kind of go for it on social media, and you want to be wise about this in terms of your quantity, but you think about like how you would actually come up with a plan, have 5-6 different styles of tweets instead of the same one, you know, again and again and again. But one thing that you'd like to see, you know, like on Twitter, right? Twitter is kind of a thing where it hits the timeline, it gets pushed, and then it's gone. It may get a lot of likes, but if it doesn't, a lot of times it'll only be there for a matter of hours. So as a game developer, and I've seen this from many developers, which makes me kind of feel like this is an okay thing to do, because I think it depends on your account, if it's a personal account versus, you know, a game account or your developer account, etc. But usually people who follow you know what they're signing up for. When it's launch time, it's going to be a busy time on your account, and there's going to be different kinds of, you know, promotions and pushes towards, you know, call to actions and pushing towards the store pages and stuff and such. And I think, you know, regardless of the different, you know, creative ideas you can do with those 8 to 10 maybe tweets or whatever in like a day or two, you still want every 12 to 24 hours the same kind of tweet going out, which is, this game is now, store page is out now, wish list now, coming soon, store page link, that kind of stuff. It needs to be done. I think even even if it's ad nauseum to you and it feels a little gross, I think it's okay to do, and you need to be doing that in this kind of market. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, and something to think about on that front. I have two different thoughts. I'm going to try to keep both in my head. Like initially when platforms like Twitter and Instagram changed it, where it wasn't just a timeline specific, you're getting every tweet everyone you follow has tweeted in the order they did it. Of like, now all of the social media algorithms have a level of curating what it is they're sending everybody. So if you are tweeting a bunch in a shorter period of time during any sort of busier launch, whatever, it's very unlikely that you're going to be actually spamming the people who follow you with, like, they're not going to get everything you tweet in their feed, which annoys a lot of people frequently, but in cases like this is exactly what it's built for. Of like, if just more generally, if someone follows someone who's on Twitter all day, every day, your followers are way less likely to run for the hills because they're seeing literally every thought that crosses your mind, versus Twitter's kind of giving them a really nice rhythm of like, oh, okay, they tweeted this a while ago, it's getting some traction, you can get this one. If it's someone who's on a few times a day, or if it's someone who's just on Twitter once every night, they'll probably only see one or two of the things that you tweeted, and most likely the ones that have gotten the most engagement already. So those platforms do help to kind of tone down your very large marketing presence, which can be nice. There's downsides as well, but
yeah, on a different level, that's the same way we approach PR and marketing, right? We don't expect you to just see one round of PR. Bumpy might miss it. Bumpy being the YouTuber that we send to, Bumpy might miss the first PR. Bumpy might not be interested at that point. He needs to hear about the game twice or 12 times or something like that. It's something, I think it's 7 times is the average time that someone's supposed to hear your game or know about your game before they would actually consider buying it. Now, that's not an exact science. It could be you hear it for the first time and just buy it. I know I've been there before. You could hear something about a game 20 times and you're still not quite there, that kind of thing, and you end up buying it after, hearing it for 20 times. So it's not an exact science, but you have to understand that, like, you have to be taking a lot of, volleys of getting your game, or, the idea of getting your game out there. This should be more than you can count on one hand, right? It should be like at least 6, 7, 8 times that you find ways to push the game out there. Now, is it going to be a PR, full thing every time? No, you can't do that, I don't think, unless it's a period of maybe 3 years. But even then, it's like, well, where is this game? You keep announcing that it's going to be this or that. So you got to watch kind of what your call to actions are and what your kind of leads are in your news posts and your PR pushes. But, again, other kinds of community events, things that bring new players in or delight current fan base. All sorts of updates that you can do in the pre-release if your game is a game that lends itself to having players in it in the pre-release phase. Obviously, those things specifically help on Steam. It doesn't mean you can't get by having a narrative-based game. We work with, obviously, Whitethorn a lot, and narrative-based games that are play once and that's the experience, right? Like, it's not supposed to be a game that you play 1,000 times. It's not a game that you expect a bunch of updates to be coming out. That can still work on Steam, but it's not at an advantage on Steam. You're not at an advantage on Steam with that kind of game. You're at an advantage on Steam when you have something that a lot of people can play prior to its release, and it still has updates coming after its release. That for whatever reason, aka money, that is what Steam is championing right now, and Valve has been championing right now, because that is what they see, brings in a lot of new players, keeps revenue extremely high. So that it's just because it's engagement, right? This is going back to tiny disasters area. This is just engagement, and these long forms of these long-term engagements pay off, because better than just spending a lot of time to release a really tight, enjoyable game. And I've seen people lament this. Developers who make these games kind of lament that these platforms might change the ecosystem of terms of what games come out, because it's like eventually narrative games are not going to be able to find footing anymore. So it's a tangential thing to what we're talking about. So I'll wrap up on that point. But where should we move to next, Bumpy?
One more thought on social media and pre-release, just because I know I'm going to lose it. Just talking about it being kind of that early sounding board and building up your community of, because you really shouldn't be overthinking every tweet and just like perfecting exactly how you want to describe your game. Use this as you're talking about it more casually, as a chance to see what's going to resonate with your potential players. Of like, if you have a bunch of tweets over a few months where you're kind of describing, oh, this is my general game, this is the update, see which ones are getting the better engagement. Let it help you figure out what your short description is. Of like, even without directly asking anyone for help, social media can be such a great way to really hone in on the copy for everything you're writing onto your Steam page before you get to that coming soon level of things, because you can see how you should phrase things, which features are worth highlighting because they're the ones that people are most excited about. All of that, social media can be a really great just test case.
Yep, and that goes across the board with what we're talking about with the store page stuff as well. Take in early data and adjust accordingly, right? Like, see what you're getting, where the successes are, and push into those areas where the failures are. Try to improve them, or if it's not working, then get away from those areas entirely, right? Like sinking ships, let them sink, right? Tiny disaster. If it's not, if that form of social media isn't working, then and you don't just keep bashing your head against it and keep using the same form. Find the ones push to the forums that are successful.
Okay, so my other question for you, Cup, was The coming soon page, is that essentially when you launch the Steam store page? Is that what it's considered as the coming soon page, or is there a?
Yeah, that's the same concept, right?
Like, just want to make sure.
Anything that's prior to like early access or full launch, where the game has a buy button, is considered coming soon. I think for the purposes of this conversation.
Right. So if you launch your game, you don't have a release date or the buy button. You're still launching the store page. It's the first time it shows up on Steam, right?
Yeah, definitely, and it's not a bad idea to have a tentative release window on there if you can. If you're willing to commit to even a year, like say 2022, if you don't know exactly next year when the game's coming out.
Yeah, or a lot of people use quarters of each year too.
Quarters is more specific, obviously months more specific than that, and then the actual date. All that, doing all those things, and Craig, you can pop in here if you're still around and have the time to throw in some extra information, but. All of those things, like putting the date out there, or I mean, at least some kind of window, is going to slot you differently than it would if you didn't have those things listed at all in, kind of Steam's listings, like long lists. But you're going to be slotting yourself in a better position, I think, if you commit to something, rather than not put anything at all, which again is completely a choice. You could not put anything at all if you don't want to. But then again, you're not slotting yourself. You're going to be putting yourself, I think, at the end of the line essentially by doing that, or in the end of the line with a bunch of thousands of other games that didn't pick some sort of release window. So it's something to keep in mind. That's what I want to get into a little bit over the next hour or so, or I guess like 45 to 50 minutes, is not just like the main obvious stuff, but what's those little like things that maybe people don't know about that you need to kind of concern yourself with. That you need to say, oh, this exists. I need to, kind of, admit that it exists and react accordingly, because this is a thing that is a real thing, that a reality, a tide that I'm going to have to either go with or right now I'm going against it, and I don't even know it. There's a lot of stuff with the store page optimizations that I hope we can, kind of take apart and get into. So we'll see how that goes, but. Yeah, where should we move on to at this point in the discussion?
I had a question. If Craig is still alive in chat and he, like you said, has a few minutes to talk, I did want to ask him. So, things that I know that we really kind of focus on, or at least what I feel is super important when a page is getting launched, for instance, and then we can of course go into tweaking and everything else down the line. And we touched on this stuff. You really need to find a diversified portfolio, or however you want to say it, of different screenshots showing the game. You don't want them to look with the same color palette. You don't want them to show the same thing necessarily. If you have a bunch of dialogue that you're proud of, you probably don't want to show 12 pages of dialogue or 12 screenshots of dialogue, because it's very samey. People don't generally read. They want to be wowed instantly by what's going on.
Right.
Different areas, different biomes, or whatever the case is, you can show bits of dialogue, but don't make that your main focus. And you need to have probably 2 trailers. One maybe could be a cinematic trailer, or something narrated over, or what have you. And then the other one probably should show gameplay. Those are things that I'm thinking of, and I want to see if Craig had anything to add to that before he heads off. And you can talk.
He might. Yeah, I was gonna say he might be out. So if he is out, no big deal. I can respond to that.
King Isaac can also throw in there, because I know he does a lot of our store page optimization if he'd like to.
So one of my thoughts was what you mentioned on screens with specifically with the dialogue. Yeah, you definitely don't want obviously a bunch of pages of just the people of talking heads or people talking, or people talking. But however, one screen that includes an out-of-context line that maybe is evocative or mysterious. Evans Remains used that a couple times, I believe, or at least once. That game that you got me to wishlist last night, Death Trash, has this weird, sort of fleshy tree that says friend at, the main character in the trailer. And it's, extremely, what is this? You just want to know more. So, yeah, I mean, picking screenshots that sort of, provide some out of context, kind of interesting,
leaves you with questions, and you want to know what's more.
It needs to be, anchored with some familiarity, or at least some of the screens need to be, providing that familiar, inviting atmosphere, or defining what the game genre is or how it's going to play to some extent, so that you can see, okay, I see how you would go about this, I see how you'd play this, but what is this? And oh my gosh, and it's a good combination of that, and that can all be done in the screenshot slider. Even without watching, or even without having a video, I have seen store page coming soon sections that actually don't have videos. Is it advisable? Probably not. But if you don't have like a working trailer that, or if you're I'm not sure if this, I'm not sure I'm qualified to say if your game is good enough for screenshots and not for video, if that's actually a true thing. Like, it feels like if your game's good for screenshots, it probably should be good for, in video as well.
Maybe the optimization might be slightly off and it's real laggy. I haven't fixed that yet, so maybe that could be an argument. But yeah, I'd agree with you for the most part.
So generally, if you're not gonna have a video, then you better have screenshots that really tell an amazing, not story, but like a tease a very good story. Right?
Try to have a video though.
Yeah, try to have a video if you can, or at least get the coming soon page up, launch it all out. Again, if you're going to do a PR push, you're basically going to have some kind of trailer. If you don't, that's a big mistake. So, but if for some reason you did go with the coming soon page early, then eventually get your trailer up when you can.
We can help with trailers too, by the way. It's a thing that we do.
Creating them, voiceover, narration, all that kind of stuff. So, I'm on like the Cooks Are Delicious, Papers, Please, and Death Trash Steam store pages. I'm just kind of looking those over and seeing kind of the sections I want to talk about. Obviously, a really important area to the right of what we just talked about with the carousel of the videos and the screenshots are the asset and the description right there. So the asset is the small capsule. This is going to be possibly the most important thing that you have to put forward on your Steam store page. Why? Because it's the only thing on the Steam store page that actually is going to make it off of the Steam store page and onto like Steam store page, Steam store lists, etc. that people will come across when they're searching for new games, when they're going through, like that kind of stuff. And the idea is it's a numbers game, right? There's always going to be some people. The funnel goes that if the most amount of people are going to see things on the front page, well, then the least amount of people are going to see things that are like just newly added and such that don't have any momentum at all. However, that's still a decent number of people. It's not zero. It's something very similar to when you post on social media, right? You're going to get some number of impressions right away. And what those precious few impressions do right off the bat makes the difference between a viral situation and a completely dead situation. Like, so with folks seeing the asset right away when they're searching, those people that are deep diving into the new and upcoming sections that like that far, if they see something that appeals to them, they're going to jump on the store page, right? So step one, we got them to click through this to the store page. Step two, can we get a follow or a wish list, etc. Maybe not right away, but maybe the second time around. Maybe it does happen 30% of the time with these people, that kind of thing. That would be really a high rate probably. But regardless, don't worry about
in terms of like a more specific step two, because I was wondering when we were talking about the carousel of like, do we have any info on like what is most important to put at the front of like, because I very rarely dig more than like 3 into a carousel. I pretty much know from like the style of the art and the vibe of the game and then reviews. So like, do we kind of know, or like what kind of information on there is about like exactly how potential buyers are looking at this and what that channel is, of like where are they going?
I would play it the same as the YouTube approach of I have 5 seconds to impress you, maybe less. And if I don't do that in 5 seconds, you're gonna bounce. So that first screenshot in Cooks Are Delicious 3 is a blueberry pancake stack, and it looks real good. I mean, to me. And I think that would look real good to other people. And so that's like for us putting our best foot forward. Papers, Please actually does its main menu, which is a little questionable, except for the actual font and artwork is pretty amazing. And it kind of sets the tone with, I'm going to put the main menu title first to sort of say we're going to go through a slideshow as a story here. It starts with the main menu that kind of sets the table. Death Trash gives you this incredibly evocative image of a cave that seems to be alive, that has like teeth coming out of the opening of the maw. The opening of the cave is like a maw, and you can see sort of eyes up there up top. So it's like this is something that we learned way back in the day with A Valley Without Wind 1. Do not bury your good content. No one will see it. You need to be bringing your most, hooking, awesome content to the forefront. Obviously, you don't want to give it all away, but you have to give some of it away. You have to give some of it away to bring people in. Otherwise, they're going to miss it. They're not going to see it. 99% of these of individuals that either see the impression or like impressions, that see the screenshots or whatever, or that actually play your game, are going to miss that content because it's too deep. Whether it's too deep in the game itself or too deep in the carousel, right? You want those later carousel shots to be more informative about what's the full aspects of the game, but they don't necessarily have to be the showcasers. They just add additional things. Not that you want to put like 4 UI only screenshots at the end. You need to have.
Yeah, I'd expect anyone who's done to the end of the carousel is the type of gamer who's looking for they want to know exactly what they're getting into. Whereas earlier ones, I want to know the vibe.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the way I would describe it. It's more about the...
Craig does have some more follow-up from the last thing, so...
Go ahead and run it, Bumpy.
Okay, real quick. He said that he's still here. Screenshot diversity is good, and you don't want all the screenshots to be too samey. As for trailers, 1 or 2 seems good to him. The quality of the current active trailer is the most important. So some trailers might work better for pre-launch versus after launch, since one is focused on gaining wish lists and so on and so forth, and the others you want people pressing the buy button. As for Steam dates, there's an internal one and an external one. The external one you can change to whatever, and it isn't used in terms of visibility or the algorithm, which is interesting. The internal one is used by Steam, though, for example, in terms of your placement on the popular upcoming list. So all very kind of important and much more detailed focused on what we were talking about earlier. So
right, and there's so much about Steam that I'm glad Craig's here for that, because there's so much about Steam that it's hard to remember all those little details. It's hard to remember that there's actually 2 different things that you have to do for dates and if you push to the external date and don't push the internal date, you're actually not benefiting from it. So there's a lot of that, and it's not that it's anyone's necessarily fault, or it's not like Valve's fault, but you have to know the intricacies of the platform you're working with, and Steam has a lot of those. Other platforms do too. We're just focused on Steam because that's I think the one that we have a lot of experience with, and really where Indie Brothers has
biggest digital distributor in the world too.
And Indie Brothers has had almost like a per diem shift from much more working with media and PR and getting the exposure outside of Steam, to where the last 3 years we've really shifted to getting exposure and pushing through the Steam store page itself, and putting a lot more emphasis on creating really good store pages, etc. And that's really kind of gave us more opportunities to help developers rather than just try to get them press. Just try to get them individuals to play the game on streams and stuff. It just gives us a way more of an opportunity to be valuable to them. So we definitely had that
shift in the industry as well, because I feel like for me in the last few years, I figure out which games I'm going to buy a lot less from the outside of Steam world of what other people are playing. What I'm hearing about is probably half, but half of it's just there's a Steam sale. I go in and just sell me something of I know what I'm looking for, and I'm getting it almost entirely from the Steam page of okay, is this something I want?
Right. I think where it's changed now is YouTubers, streamers, and specifically press. Now, streamers can take a game and run with it, right? And can make a game and can make it really big, just by sort of their community and guiding it. I think press and traditional press in particular, their value is in validating. They validate your product over a lot of other products that haven't been validated, right? So by getting a big article on this or that, it lends to the fact this is one of those again, even if you don't follow it anymore, maybe you have the social media follow on if there's you don't follow this game website actually on the website anymore, well, they understand that they're finding ways to push their content onto socials as well, and this is one of those opportunities that you're trying to get the 7 times viewed before, digested before release, right? And so that's where I think traditional PR still helps, and getting those press is getting that sort of that validation over a lot of games that don't get those articles, right? Oh, this got covered. It must be popular. It must be going in the right direction. It doesn't mean that they're going to go and buy it immediately, but by getting that validation, they're going to go. Some percentage of people, like, again, not everybody is even reading these things anymore or using them as like the reference to get to the game page itself, but a lot of people still are. And when that goes up, then there is a perception that your game has some buzz around it, whether it does or not. The perception is created by that article itself. So I think there's a lot of help there. But I mean, we've made the mistake before thinking we can really make a difference by just hammering a really good PR plan and making sure that this game is out into all the hands of everybody that we think it's good for them to play and stuff, where we really should have been focused more on making sure like the store page was truly the hook that it needs to be nowadays, so that you can compete with an exponentially growing amount of other competition and stuff. And again, it's not all competition. There's a lot of Steam games that I think get released by hobbyist developers for low prices or free that really don't expect to make a whole lot of profit. So it's not as if, for how busy the market is, if you actually look at how many games are being released on Steam, you're not really competing with all of those necessarily, right? Like it's not like they're all in the same like attitude, boat, whatever you want to say it, in terms of your desire to have a commercial release that supports your company, etc. That's not what everybody's doing on Steam. So
yeah, I don't want to league as your like filler word, but I don't want it to sound like some games are in a league that is better. It's just different. Like you're playing to a different audience of like, this is just a casual project that I did that some people might enjoy versus like, this is my life's work.
Correct. And those casual things can go big too. I mean, that's the beauty of this situation, is that there is no ceiling if things work out. So and again, if you're just a hobbyist kind of thing and that's your first game, that's where you go. But so yeah, the other thing we didn't talk about, which is right below the that really important capsule asset,
which I just want to reiterate one more time, is probably the most important thing. I mean, you said this already, but like it can't be understated. It's the thing that grabs and pulls you in. But yes, go on. And
more and more people have found out that you don't have to keep it static, and it's actually better if you do update it, right? So if you add early access release, or if you add new update, new content, new art or something, just new hats and beach balls, baby. We've added them. Something, just whatever. If it, something that is like what, like, oh cool, like something that pulls them in, or just tells them, hey, there's a new update out, or content, and that's going to show up again in the searches as well. That game is active, right? Games as a service.
There's a section now on Steam. If you if you say you own a game, and maybe this might not help you sell it, but say you own the game, or players like you love this or whatever it is, but it'll say recently updated. So maybe somebody played your game for a little bit, they're like, it's not everything I want, but they're working on some updates, I'll check it later. There's a recently updated thing for anything in your library. It shows anytime there's an update in that section. You can scroll through.
And remember that you're building credibility there with the people that you have in your community. That's going to help. If you want people to spread the word about your game, that's a great way to go about it, right? It's not going to necessarily directly happen, but by doing that, you're giving your current community like more and more fodder and delighting them more, and saying, look, and just establishing a really good reputation with them by doing that. So I feel like there's no, you just got to make sure you don't like go down some of these avenues too far and work too much on them. But like obviously keeping that, if you have the ability to keep your game updated and stuff, that's going to help, I think, over time. So let's move down to the short description, which another major, really important thing that you want to get right, because it's one of the first things that you interact with on the store page. So it's the first actual like full sentence that you'll be dealing with like on the store page. You have the game name, you have the carousel, you may have a store page stream running, and you have the asset, that small capsule asset. Other than that, all you can see on most browsers when you bring it up, depending on how big your screen is, but for the most part, you're gonna catch that and that alone, maybe the early access game or whatever. The start of the description, that short description up top, and so it's supposed to be like 2 sentences, maybe 3. It doesn't have to be. It could be 1. It doesn't have to be anything really. I mean, like it just has to be the right thing for your game, and it really has to be. I don't think it has to be anything. Like I don't want to say this has to be this or that, but you're thinking about an elevator pitch that you might give to someone to make, like, again, an elevator pitch, the idea I'm going to step in an elevator with someone who I want to convince to, publish my game, to buy my game, etc. And I have about 15 seconds to do so before they get off the elevator as we move up the floor or whatever. So what in 1, 2, or possibly 3 sentences captures and conveys your game in a way that is a really good hook. We talked about hooks and anchors before, right? So that hooks and anchors can be moved into your short description very easily if you can find the right, not easily, but with some thought and effort, you can bring really the concept together of what would be a really good short description. So I'm being vague right now. Let's just read a few of them. Let's read Death Trash, Papers, Please, and Cooks are Delicious 3. So Death Trash features a post-apocalyptic world where cosmic horrors long for humanity, but meet punks with shotguns. It combines old-school role-playing, modern action gameplay, and player freedom. Create your own character and explore a handcrafted world. So 3 great sentences right there. The first one is evocative, right? Features a post-apocalyptic world. Okay, familiar. A lot of people know these things, right? Where cosmic horrors, interesting, long for humanity, very interesting, but meet punks with shotguns. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. It combines old school role playing, modern action gameplay, and player freedom. A ton of information, a ton of things that people like to hear. Create your own character and explore a handcrafted world wraps up that kind of aspect. Thoughts on that particular short description, and did that work for y'all, or are you seeing what I'm saying, or is that is something different for you for that one?
Go first, Tiny Disaster.
It's hard for me because this isn't a game I would typically play, so it's not one of I know what I would be looking for.
Do you feel like what I'm saying though, in terms of like they do the familiar and the strange, right?
Yep. They've done a good job of like grounding in for people who do play in the genre of like what to expect, of like here's the familiar, here's why you like it, with here's the spin that we're giving it and why you should play this game in particular. So I do think it mixes those pretty well.
Yeah, and notice that it doesn't lead with, it combines old school role playing, modern action gameplay, and player freedom. It doesn't lead with this is an RPG. It doesn't lead with this is an adventure game. It leads with something that maybe lends a little bit to what it's going. Death Trash features a post-apocalyptic world. That's not exactly the genre of the game, but it gives you, it grounds you a little bit into what's going on, and then it gives you where cosmic horrors long for humanity but meet punks with shotguns, which is by far the most interesting half sentence in the entire paragraph. So it again, this chat today is called Best Foot Forward, and that is both in the macro and the micro sense. That's a micro best foot forward there by them making that decision.
Do you want to grab what Craig said there, just to touch on the start of this, the capsule art thing?
Updated capsule art will also be shown when wishlist notifications are sent out. That's important for big updates or DLC. So yeah, your art is by updating your capsule art, it's not just your store page that's getting that benefit. It's throughout Steam, and also to your followers, your wish lists, etc. And for the wish lists, right, it's like every time you go on sale for 20%, I think, or higher, or if you launch the game, they get an email. And so you're essentially trying to convince as many of them as possible to take the leap at that point. A lot of wish lists are not going to take the leap maybe until 50% off. So it's not something that you're looking to convert all of them right away or anything, but a good percentage of it. And as we talked about before, you'll probably add more wish lists. In fact, it's guaranteed that you'll add more wish lists during your sales and such. So don't be discouraged if you actually get more wish lists than sales occasionally during discount promotions. That's actually pretty normal. Until you get around probably 50 or 75%, if you're getting more wish lists than purchases at those higher levels, then something's off a little bit. But if you're like at like 25, 33, 40%, you're going to pick up a lot of wish lists along with those purchases, because there's a lot of people that want to wait until the game is cheaper, and that's just the way it is. Yep. So papers, please. Congratulations, the October Labor Lottery is complete. Your name was pulled. For immediate placement, report to the Ministry of Admission at Greston Border Checkpoint. An apartment will be provided for you and your family in East Greston. Expect a Class 8 dwelling. That's it. That's it. So extremely focused on what exactly it is you're getting into. Immersive, right? Like it doesn't tell you really anything other than it's giving you kind of almost agency in that it's like, I'm talking to you. It's almost like a
you're weird, in the game now, whether you like it or not.
It's like a twisted, Uncle Sam thing. You know what I mean? Like it's like, you know, it's pointing at you. You're like, whoa, what? Like, and it gives you that sense of, you know, there's like there's a dystopic feel to it, right? Like it's like something's off here. You know, this is feeling very, very fascisty, like very, very fashy. So. And then you can kind of just go from there. You know, Lucas Pope is a really brilliant guy, and I think that his thought was, I know what kind of game I have here. I know it's going to be, you know, something that really is, you know, brings people in and is a kind of a gem, different kind of game that most people have seen before.
Glory to Arcen.
Ended up getting 40,000 total Steam user reviews, which is off the charts for an indie, especially like for just a one-man or a one-person team. Not that he did everything by himself, but I mean, like, he was generally the only developer and such on it. So yeah, it's a very that one's a very interesting concept.
I love that one.
Yeah, that's another one that got picked up by content creators, and it really took off.
Right. Yep, it definitely did. I think that that's a great one if you feel, you know, confident you can go for it. Again, because it's almost like go for the hook, right? Don't go for the informative too much if you feel like that's not going to be something that benefits right off the bat. Now, some information, like we saw in Death Trash, can be a good thing, but again, find the right place for it, and don't just lead with it or anything like that.
Because I think the difference here is it would be so hard to find anything else to really compare it to. Like, I'm sure if you dig really niche you can, but like there's no way to just like one line, this is kind of what you can expect.
Yeah,
You've played this genre before.
If you look at the capsule art, it actually has been updated since it was originally released. I don't know when, but a dystopian document thriller was put there at some point, and I don't think it was there originally, and that is there to ground. It's an anchor, right? It's trying to give more information than what is currently available, with still not being really specific at all. But it just does. It gives more information for people to say, okay, this gives me some sort of, you know, reasonable thought of what I'm getting into.
Now, it's a bit funny because Papers, Please is actually kind of the perfect example of capsule art and that brief description that pulls you in, because the rest of the store page is absolutely terrible. I mean, their screenshots are fine and their trailer. They did everything in that top section really well. You look at everything below the buy button, the reviews are fine, that's good, but everything else is kind of bad if you look at it.
Yeah, it's short and sweet. I think that you're right that they're really leaning on that we captured you in the first blush. Yeah. And it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt that 97% positive and 96% positive are like the top two things you see at that point. And if you do scroll past like some of the medium stuff, you still see 85 Metacritic, a bunch of awards, and then you get into the actual stuff. So,
and there's always going to be something to be said for like, if you've made a truly great game, you can push the boundaries of like the general rules for your Steam page more than like, never assume you've done that before you make your page. Like, that's something you grow into when you have that 97%.
Well, always take is, you know, again, the whole concept of what we're talking about, right? Best foot forward. So, you know, even if like Papers, Please clearly didn't need to have everything perfect, everything that we're going to talk about and go into today, but they did a lot of the stuff right at that first, you know, the first glance stuff, the stuff in the upper section, the screenshots, the video, the capsule art, the little brief description. And then everything else didn't, but their game was so popular, it didn't matter. But we're trying to prepare or let the indie devs know that, you know, this is all stuff that's good, but you could do better, and you always want to try. Like a Tiny Disaster just said, you always want to try to do everything you can to put your best foot forward when you're starting off.
Yeah, and whether or not they meant to or not, they got away with it, obviously what you mentioned before, but they also got away with it by sort of insulating that middle part with it just working out at the bottom. Obviously it's genius, and at the top or rather at the bottom it's just sort of worked out that way because of all the positive reviews, right? That's just what's going to naturally happen. But credit to the developer for making that first initial kind of blush of the page, you know, and that's the most important part. They did that part, right? And so they got that, and as you scroll down, you're probably sold by the time you get into that next little part. But like you said, I totally agree. Don't just presume that you've hit a home run anywhere in particular and say, okay, now we don't have to care about this. There are developers and there are people that I met before that know they have a hit before they release it. Somehow they release it and it is a hit, and that's and they can and their store pages are just like whatever.
This shouldn't work.
Like it totally can happen.
Yeah.
It's an exception to the rule, right? Don't rely on it. Don't think that's something that can happen for you. If it does, great, but don't think that it's going to happen, that you don't have to plan for it, and the contingencies that goes with.
Well,
Cooks are delicious.
Look at Gang Beasts real quick too. Just the store page on that one is again, the bottom section just completely dead, devoid of anything. Whereas again, the top section they did pretty good. So
yeah, and there is something to say to brevity in your middle section. If your game isn't like an AI War 2 or something where it's like, I actually do want to digest a ton more information on this kind of game. It depends on the game, right? So Papers, Please certainly could give you more information than they do. But at the same time, it's like, no, get in there and play it and see what happens too. There's that aspect of Papers, Please.
Case study for anyone who's making a game that does stand out from a crowd a little bit, that it's harder to pin down as like, oh, for players who like this. So Papers, Please can be a good one to look at. If like you're not sure what angle to come from, because there's a good chance your potential players have never played anything like this before, but will still enjoy it. So coming at it from that interesting angle can be a good way to go.
Right, and that's definitely a problem in itself that you have to solve, right? That if you're like, I can't necessarily ground this or relate this to anything else, then you better find a way to bridge the gap for folks. Moving on to Cooks Are Delicious 3. And the description: cook, serve, and manage your food truck as you dish out hundreds of different foods across war-torn America in this massive sequel to the million-selling series. So, obviously, I have bias on this because I helped write this. We wanted to include the fact that, the game was popular, so we included that at the end. We wanted to include that you were going to be making really good food, and we wanted you to know that it was going to be a weird, wacky setting compared to what maybe you'd seen before in the Cooks Are Delicious games, or we wanted new players to go kind of head turn a little bit and say, what, Cooks Are Delicious 3 is going to be in war-torn America, that kind of thing. So we wanted there's familiar, right, strange, and then leaning a little bit, not resting on our laurels, but leaning on the fact that we have leverage. We built something up already that has succeeded, and this being the third game in that trilogy, that's already seen great success with Cooks Are Delicious 1 and 2. We want to make sure that that's related as well, specifically for of course old people who have played the game before might know or be like whatever, but it's validation, right? Million-selling series is a validation to new potentially to new impressions coming in and saying, okay, if it's million-selling, it obviously some section of people like it, and that's a validation that you'd like to get. So that's the idea there. It is short and sweet. We saw the other two actually had I think 3 sentences, where this is just 1. I guess it could kind of be 2 if we wanted to kind of divvy it up, but it's basically just 1 long sentence. So I don't know. We certainly don't have the 40,000 reviews of Paper Please. It's not like it was going to go to that, given I think it's a different kind of gem, a little more of it is a little niche. It's tough because I feel like a lot of people do like the game. A lot of people don't like it because of the anxiety. people are like, food game, great, cooking game, great, and they come and they play it and stuff. But it's still a hard sell, I think, on like the general market to get people to come in and play a game that they're like, I don't know. It's hard to describe, Bumpy. Like,
well, to be honest, I never would have probably ended up playing it if it wasn't something that you guys needed me to check out and do. And I was like, oh, I had a lot of fun with it. I actually enjoy it. So
conveying the gameplay as far as like the actual enjoyment that you have, succeeding with you know, smacking food together and making it out perfect and all that on perfect days. You know, it's not an easy thing to do, right? It's like complicated, for sure. So yeah, it's like, but to me, that description serves us well. Again, like for this is, like I said, I have all the data on this kind of stuff, so we can look and see it, you know, during our spikes in sales, or rather when we do our discounts and when we expect, you know, sales to go up, and where we want them to be, they're hitting those expectations. And so that to us at least lends to the idea that we're doing a pretty good job on our store page. So let's look at a few other things as we scroll down. I know we're running out of time. This actually might be like a two-parter. Not that we would do this immediately next week, but this could definitely be revisited again at some point. Like, and there's things that we could get into that we really haven't today.
There's basically the bottom section is about the only thing left that I think we should talk about. It would make sense to logically close out with. So
okay, that sounds good, given that we're about 20 minutes out from wanting to start like really wrapping up.
And a lot of it's not even rehashing what we've already talked about, but you know, it's a different thing, and it doesn't need probably as much in-depth talking about, because again, it's basically what position 3 on what you're going to be looking at, or 4.
Yeah,
even.
let's kind of like go through that, and then maybe rapid fire through some of the other little sections or you know, spots we can see on the store page as we wrap up, just to give, you know, an impression on that. So I'm going off of Cookster Delicious 3's page because it's fairly fleshed out in terms of how many different sections we're utilizing, right? I mentioned before that some sections that you don't utilize won't actually appear at all unless they're, you know, being used, if that makes sense, right? So recent events and announcements section won't appear, review section won't appear unless you actually have something to go in that section, if that makes sense, right?
Okay, so you gotta basically populate that, right?
Right, you populate it, it will appear. If you don't, it's not going to. And that's not to say that you should have every single section populated.
Yeah.
But go over the
sense.
ones that you think make sense to you. One that we found out really early on, is a good idea. Is like the I think it's special announcement section, I think is what it's called. And if you go down right below reviews, that's where we have the Giant Bomb Game of the Year winner, the Game Maker Awards Best Game, and then join our Discord channel, which has been there since basically the inception of the page.
Yeah, see, that's a weird one, because that's so the whole reviews section is a special announcement. Is that what you're saying?
No. Reviews is its own thing, and then the special announcement section starts at the Giant Bomb Game Maker.
But you have to read more, because it's all tied to the same thing. Like refresh the page. Right.
No, I understand. You have to pull it down. So you do want to know.
Okay. Never mind. I understand. I'm sorry.
Yep. So optimally, but the disc right now, the Discord is getting pushed a little bit. It's not quite optimal for us to want to push it like I want to do to push the Discord, but we're kind of making that sacrifice and hiding it, you know, kind of where you have to scroll down a little bit because of the Giant Bomb and the Game Maker Awards, which we think at this point is a better sell, and people will probably find their way to the Discord regardless of whether they catch it there or not if they want to.
Yep.
But during coming soon page time, when we don't have those awards, the Discord is up front and center, and one of the first things that you would see as you scroll down and say, oh, they have a Discord. So we're trying to, you know, obviously funnel both ways, right? From the Discord to the Steam page, and then back from the store page to the Discord, right? For people that are taking new impressions on the store page.
As a general rule, your Discord is probably one of your easiest and best ways to build community alongside social media. Because in and of itself, it's sort of its own social platform. So definitely want to have nice art, just like your capsule art. Some nice art that points towards your Discord in exactly as you have it here on Cookster Delicious 3. Or another one we use as an example is what Satisfactory has good Discord button, basically, so people can just get to it. It's a really good idea, so do it.
Yeah, I thought we had it for, let's see. Yeah, we have it for AI War 2, but again, because of the new DLC, it gets pushed a little bit, but you like think of Discord front and center pre-release being important, and then afterwards it's like still have it there, but it doesn't have to be prioritized against maybe some awards that you've gotten.
I'll post in chat the Satisfactor if anyone wants to go take a peek at that, because they have that front and center. Yeah.
So review section. Don't just think of it as a review section. You can have pre-release comments from like notable individuals. If a YouTuber covers it, you can still consider like if you could. A lot of times we'll always. It's wise, I think, to check with the person that you're using the quote for before just quoting them. It's a nice thing to do. I think some people just ignore that and do whatever, but I think
quoted
from
once,
our perspective,
and then I got bumped for bigger YouTubers, but it was nice while it lasted.
Right. No, it's good. It's good. Like no matter what, we're always looking for what is like sort of the optimal quote, and that's not necessarily like if they're the biggest or it's just kind of like how good is the quote weighed up against what kind of source there is and stuff, and like naturally
I know.
So yep. Oh, I wasn't. I was just thinking that in my head, where it's like, yep, you still want to be adding, even if say, Alpha Beta Gamer, which is not trying to make fun of them or anything like that. Like they're not like a small outlet or anything like that, but they would be someone that maybe probably plays your game first, right? Gives you a quote early on in the process. You don't have to wait until launch or whatever to put that quote up. You put that quote up as when you get that Alpha Beta Gamer coverage, and they have a nice sentence about you. Go ahead and link it right there in the coming soon page. months ahead of release and all that. Start to establish that validation that we've talked about, right? That like when you see reviews from A, B, and C, and you've heard of them, it's validating and says to the the potential buyer, it's safe, that much safer, less of a risk, I guess, to make the purchase, right? To see that there's those reviews up there, and I've even seen people do funny things with it. Let's see here. Cosmos Quick Stop. Let's see if they still have it. It was very funny. I saw this the other day.
Duskers had some good ones.
There's review section. It's like the Dark Souls of whack-a-mole. Like 4 people at a convention, but like 4 people at a convention is the quote, is the people who said it. So you don't have. It doesn't have to be official, right? It doesn't have to be something. If it's a funny thing, it's a funny game, and it's irreverent or whatever, you can kind of put some irreverent stuff there as sort of a joke as well, right? Like it doesn't have to necessarily be always serious, but if you have those serious reviews that really validate your game, make sure that they get in there. Obviously, with Quick Serve Delicious 3, we have a PC Invasion Touch Arcade, which is focused on the Switch, and the Rock Paper Shotgun as well, which obviously PC Invasion and Rock Paper Shotgun good to have for validation on Steam. And then the Touch Arcade quote was just really, 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 really good. So that's why we use that.
Don't forget to fully localize your Steam store page in languages that the game will be available for. This can sometimes be forgotten, and it's an easy fix from Craig.
Totally true, right? So you're not going to get listed on a lot of the international store pages, or rather the regional store pages in different countries and different areas of the world if you don't localize for their languages. Now, you don't have to localize your whole game, of course. Nice if you can, and you have that ability to do that, and it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, and it doesn't take forever or whatever. But if you can't, it's still good, even if your game is all in English, to make those store page localizations.
Yeah, make sure it shows, because you get to choose that, right? Languages that it's available in, interface, full audio, and subtitles.
Right, and a lot of countries, a lot of folks still will play English-only games in non-English speaking countries. So it's no reason not to do that. Right. And then from there, the idea is that the game is selling really well, and you have the extra budget for it, and you can go into your stats and say, what countries, are selling really well beyond the English-speaking countries. Oh, we're doing really well in Germany. Oh, we're doing really well in France. Yeah. We're going to actually try for a full localization now in those languages and make a push towards those countries. You don't just do that automatically and maybe throw away money that you don't have. But if the budget serves for that, you can do that sort of as like an incremental thing even after your initial launch. Optimally, you would get it in by launch, but again, if the money's not there, like you can't. You have to wait until it gets there. So let's get to the all important about this game section, which again isn't probably the most important thing, but it's going to be like what we talked about earlier. I think Tiny Disaster mentioned it. this is where the people who are, you know, probably diehard or hardcore fans are really going to want to get something out of this area, right? This is where the features list is at, like 99 times out of 100, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked. I don't know if we've talked about this extensively, but features shouldn't. We should. I think it was just fine that we shouldn't necessarily see it as this game features, but this game offers you. This game offers you these things, right? Like, this is a game that offers you the ability to do this. This game offers you, you know, like great different, you know, upgrade your food truck with dozens of gameplay affecting modules and stuff.
It's just it's features, or you know.
But look at Lake on Steam. So they're like, we have a features list, but it says, instead of saying features, it says play lake and ... escape to a beautiful rustic environment, drive around the lake in your dad's trusty mail truck, talk to a range of engaging characters. So it's like it's an exercise of like making sure that you're offering. I think the word is benefits, right? You don't necessarily want a features list. You want a benefits list. What's the benefits of playing this game as a new, I don't know what this game is about kind of person? That's just, and I'm not saying that features shouldn't be called features, but rather that's the exercise you should be doing in your head as you're getting like those features lists together.
Essentially, what can you do in the game? What is the game?
Yeah, about? and like, why does that appeal to me as someone who hasn't played your game before, right? Like why is it, like what do I get out of that? You know, so thinking about that, you know, like you can look at I think Death Trash does have.
I want to look at Lake here again real quick, just because it's something that a lot of the things that we were talking about earlier didn't have, and it's good to have screenshots, break up different sections about what you have with screenshots or GIFs. It's
moving GIFs. Yep.
Something that's really kind of come into prominence, especially in the last couple of years, and probably GIFs over still images at this point. But like with Cookserve Delicious 3, you don't have.
Look how calm. Yeah, look how calm Lake's GIFs are.
No, I know.
Like, they're so calm, which is, I really appreciate, right? Like, there's some games that like are gonna GIF because they want to show you sort of like the flashiness, and you're just like, I'm having a seizure, like, you know what I mean? Just trying to read around this kind of thing. So I think I think that I've seen in most cases people will rely on like a single GIF, and then have those still images as well. But in the case of this one, 2 GIFs works because one of them almost is a still image until the truck drives through.
Yeah,
about 3 seconds in.
Like, is there movement? Because you see a little bit of light shifting in the trees.
So it's you're right. You're right. Actually, I didn't even catch that. That it's all, to me, it was just all the trucks. So and that's something I think that's really special that they did a good job on, right? Like, it's something that
it's a really interesting page of like, I'm familiar with the game, but not having read any of the text, I'm still interested just from the visuals on this page. Like, it very much gives me. This is the vibe.
Which is certainly important, right? Because like you know, a lot of people are going to do that before reading, like if they read at all. So like, you can't rely on people necessarily diving into your texts. So it's a great point that we're getting close to the end, that we didn't mention this, but as we're getting to the about this game section, it's not just about the words, right? There has to be still some of those evocative images, maybe different than the screenshot situation, more of a banner promotional kind of situation. Or a GIF, or something that just puts your game into motion a little bit in a really quality way that's going to bring people in.
And that kind of
even further
ties into something else. Is I don't find better ways or different ways or interesting ways to say the same thing if you have to. So you have your capsule art, then you have your brief description up top. Mm-hmm. If you still want to have about this game, and you're like, I still need to give a brief description, don't copy paste that. Do it in a different way. Even if you're going to say the same thing, come up with a different way of saying it. Maybe include more details because you have more room to write. Break it out into more sentences.
Example about this game for Cookserve Delicious 3, we had talked about the short description before. It starts off, hit the road in this massive sequel to the million-selling Cookserve Delicious series as you travel across the United States to participate in the Iron Cook Food Truck Championships with your trusty robot crew, Whisk and Cleaver. And so we did repeat what we said some of up top, but it wasn't a copy paste, right? Like, it was like, let's rework this sentence a little bit,
exactly,
and then let's get into some details that we didn't have in that short description within the first shot. And then for us, we have a couple of like notable streamers as our voice actors, so we point to them as well and make sure that it's like, if some small percentage of individuals see that and that convinces them that much more, Exactly right. Exactly right. So
Yeah.
it's like, there's no reason not to include that kind of stuff. It's not like we want to put it. You don't just put it over everything else, right? You have to find the right places and to do all that kind of stuff and such. But you want to keep that in mind and stuff. And so yeah, just going through the descriptions.
I still want to see a gif of the octopus getting its head chopped off between your features section, the bullet points, and the other thing. That's what I want to see.
That could be interesting. We definitely relied on the still art more, like we do at like conventions, right? Obviously, we're not gonna, you have the trailer running on the television, but like that roast beef and cheddar sandwich on our poster, like has brought in so many people just to talk about it. It's crazy. And so you want to lean into what your strengths are, and for us, it's like, hey, have that good-looking food that makes people, after they run to go get a bite, come back and play your game and stuff. So. Yeah, like for us, like with this features list, we emphasized some of the things that we know people would like. Over 100 hours of gameplay spanning over 380 levels. Again, trying to tell the player that there is content here, right? Like that we want to make sure that that when you get this, you're not going to get the rug pulled out from you. And this is true whether your game is really long or really short, right? If you're like, say, a Whitethorn game, a very short narrative game, you don't want to necessarily hide that from your customer. You don't necessarily want to put it out there in a bad way either. There's a correct way of putting it out there that's going to benefit you, right? Again, not too vague, but saying it in the right way. Understanding that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is included in your features list. But basically, you're looking for a more of a, and I mean, like, one of the games that isn't on here or that we talked about before. Like Death Trash actually has a lot to talk about, right? It's more like a Fallout kind of game or that kind of thing where there's much more.
AI War 2's just
AI War 2, right?
So much.
Endless amount of information, and that's okay if you know that your audience is an audience that wants that kind of information put out there. And for those that don't, you get to capture them in that first blush, right? Like we talked about, when you get to the about this game section. If people didn't vibe with your game right away, they're not going to be down there, right? If they did vibe it with it right away and they're not someone who likes to read a bunch, they probably already wishlisted, bought, etc. So it's okay to, get a little wordy and verbose in your features and your description area about this game area. If it serves your game well, because it's complex, Death Trash, AOR, that kind of stuff. Like there's clearly a lot of different things going on. It's not just like simple to show off. Rimworld we recently worked on. I was like, how am I gonna get this all into a PR? Like it was just like, oh my god, there's so much information. So it's just but that's purposeful, right? It's purposeful that they're doing that there's reasons behind that, because they know the audience, the people that make the engine run are the ones that want to see that kind of stuff. So
the flip side of that one, I was going to ask you guys to dig into why you think it works, but I'm not sure we have time. The page for Townscaper, I was just flipping through as we were talking, and it's so interesting because it's doing very, very well. Yeah, Townscaper, all one word. Its short description is 4 words. It has very little in the longer description, but it's doing fine.
Oh, I've seen Townscaper before. Yeah, it was this. So the concept of it is pretty insane, very smooth, right? Like just city builder, but it's all connected. And
it's barely a game. It's just it's basically Lego. Like
Katamari Lego with buildings, kind of thing. Like it's crazy. Yeah, it's instant.
They went minimalist in the gameplay and everything, and even in the store page.
Town building toy. They just want to let you know what it. But that's the thing, is that they have such an easy sell there, right? Like it's like they don't have to be complicated, because it's not complicated what it is you're doing in this. It's quite simple. Now, what you can do seems like fairly endless, right? Like or infinite, right? But the actual concept is simple. You don't have to, over explain or anything like that. And as you can see, even in early access, 9,000 plus reviews, and that's as of it released in June 30th. So I mean, that's over over 6. Excuse me, June 30th, 2020. So okay. Yeah. So, but still, 9,000 reviews in a year of early access is extremely strong.
I think if anything, what they really wanted to drive home with the description is there isn't more to this. Of this is it. Of we're not going to go too deep, because I don't want you to think it's too deep. This is a passion project, which I think was a great phrase to put in there. No goal, just go play.
Yep, and then it was a passion project that was such a great concept that Raw Fury was willing to publish it. So I mean, like, you know, you get that behind you. It's very strong stuff.
One of the things that might have worked with this as well, real quick, is it's literally so different than anything else. Like, sure, some people might say it looks lazy, or, you know, you could do all these other things that we're talking about, but sometimes you're just like, I have this simple idea, and I'm going to make my Steam store page just look completely different because it's not going to be filled out with all this extra information. And that stark contrast to everything else, it's different, and it will stand out because it's different. You're like, what? There's 4 words. What is it? You know, and then you kind of scroll through, and you're like, okay. And then they say there's not much to it other than this is the idea, concept. Go have fun. So I think that contrast is one of the things that helps it stand out.
Right, which is so important, right? Like you have to get a little weird, unique, different.
And it won't work with every game, right?
No. But you have to find that in your own game, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's why I did think it was an interesting contrast to the ones we were talking about, where you did have that in-depth description for the players who want that, versus this of like, just having an in-depth description would hurt you.
Yeah.
And even though it seems like it's different audiences, it could be a Venn diagram or whatever. Like, there can be a lot of crossover between a Townscaper player and a Rimworld player potentially. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't necessarily exclude
100%
wide swaths of those audiences that are probably be interested in both games. So because people are people. We're not just like, into only one item or one sort of concept most of the time. Like, there's
we can like two
lots
things.
of different stuff. So we can absolutely like 2 things. That's allowed.
That's it.
So that's it. Now you're limited.
Only 2.
So at 1:54 p.m. 55, we have about 5 minutes left. Here's what I propose. I propose that we, at some point down the road, not sure when, but we do another episode that's similar to this, that gets into a little bit less of the fundamentals and more of the deep, dark secrets that maybe you don't know about that you need to be doing as a Steam developer as well, that we just didn't have time to get to today.
Yeah, essentially this was
Curator Connect, right? Like, driving positive Steam reviews, the more like this section. There's a lot of different things. And then, of course, we can get into actually what's going on in the back end as well that you can see in Steamworks, which we just barely touched on today. Sorry, Bumpy, to cut you off.
You're going to put us out of a job. Stop talking. I'm kidding. This was just kind of a, hey, you want to launch your store page. You're not sure what all you need to have before the store page is ready to go live, or what the best plan or direction your store page should take. This kind of gives you that idea. There's still a ton of other stuff that, of course, we're going to hopefully talk about some of these things in the future, but this is just kind of a stepping stone. This is the kind of first blush, that first glance, and gets you on the right track.
Yeah, I feel like in a way, because we initially talked about the coming soon version, and we never really dug into like what it looks like for early access and then launch. So this, like, we really did cover that first step, and there is so much more to get into.
Yep.
Which is encouraging, I think. I didn't expect us necessarily to cover all of this in the first go round. I was hoping it would feel like the content was that detailed and rich, that we have so much more to talk about when we feel like that's the next time we want to come around to it. So maybe we'll revisit this sooner than later, but we don't know yet. We don't necessarily know what we're going to be doing next week. So we'll kind of figure that out and go from there. We'll have our conversation about it, because one of the things I'm thinking is, like you said, early access and full launch it's kind of its own thing. Yep. And then, like I said, just some of the little back end stuff on Steamworks that it's like, I don't think we're necessarily giving anything away, because all you need is $100 to get on the Steam backend, Bumpy. But here's what I think where it helps. It's really helpful for us because it's a good exercise for us personally to go back over all this stuff, because there's so many little things that you can forget about. And 2, even if somebody really intimately watches this, like in and out and stuff like that, when they get to their launch, they're still gonna forget stuff. It just happens every single time. It's so hard to get every little switch flipped like you want to with the Steamworks and all that kind of stuff. So there is something to be discussed there, I think, fully. And then the early access and full launch, those are definitely, I think, like, definitely probably discussion points in themselves. So it is nice to know that when we dove into this, we're now at like 2 hours in, and I feel like we've not just barely scratched the surface. We have covered a lot, But we certainly haven't covered the full, breadth and depth of what is releasing a game on Steam and what you want to keep in mind.
Okay, a couple things real quick. Do you have any like one-off quick advice nuggets you can give us, a Tiny Disaster, for social media? I know we kind of already talked a little bit about that.
I don't think I could do it in this timing.
No
It's like
worries.
what I had prepared was like the best foot forward for social media, which is at least a slightly longer chunk. So
That's
we
fair.
can dig more into it next time, I think.
Okay, so we did talk a bit about some of this stuff earlier, so we're going to basically be changing formats either next week or soon, and we're trying to figure out exactly how that's going to work. We may break out the gameplay altogether and have a separate stream that just is a bit shorter but showcases the game more fully, and then we don't know if maybe we'll throw our segments of what's new at Indie Brothers into that and maybe the social media part of that, or if we will we're not 100% sure what we're going to do, but then we're going to have a more
Work in progress.
in-depth, focused solely on the discussion, so we don't have to really kind of split it up in the middle and so on and so forth. And we're probably going to stream, we're guessing, to multiple, so like YouTube and to Twitch. So however you guys want to watch it, it'll be a little bit easier that way. And we'll also have the VOD saved forever on YouTube. So work in progress. We'll figure out how all that works out, but that's tentative next week or maybe even the week after, depending.
Yeah, it feels really good right now, just personally, for us to be talking about that kind of stuff. I feel like, despite what we're still kind of in a work in progress alpha beta situation, the momentum feels really good, and that we're heading towards this felt good today. The last several discussions we've had, they felt really on point. I hope we continue to give Tiny Disaster good content for the TikTok at the very least. But it will be nice to be able to expand into YouTube and see what's going on that front as well, knowing that that's more of a generalized, video platform versus this one being much more, Twitch being much more of a video game, playing platform. And yeah, there's a lot of just chatting as well and such. But totally. I don't know how many game developer just chattings are going on all the time, or more importantly, discussing the ins and outs of marketing and Steam Store page optimization. Probably not a ton of competition for us on Twitch, but at the same time, it is this, I don't know if we're necessarily meant for Twitch itself, what we're talking about here all the time. So we're going to play around with that, see how that goes. Like I said, pretty excited just how the episodes have been going consistently. But yeah, it almost seems like the gameplay portion should be different than the discussion portion. So we're figuring out what makes sense there. And we'll be back, I think, in the next couple of weeks with not just a new format, but maybe a new schedule. We'll see how it goes. But we're probably still going to keep Wednesday from where we're at, 12 to 2, but we'll see how it goes.
All right, take care. We've been the Indie Brothers plus a Tiny Disaster. And we want to help you guys with your indie developed games. So any indie devs out there, check out the website, theindiebros.com. You can also email Josh at theindiebros.com, and those are easy ways to get in contact with us. Of course, follow us on Twitter at IndieBrosPR or the Twitch channel. So thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.